find you. And then, I'll find them.
A hot desert wind rushed past Dr. Allison Wreaver as she gently rode her camel along with the procession. This country, Nequer, was such a vast and majestic place, one that called to the young archaeologist. Her mother had roots in this ancient land, and those familial ties stirred within Allison's imagination. Sand dunes and dry patches of land stretched all around her, and with the seemingly empty nature of the country, there was also a quiet radiance. It was quite different than her home country of Ocean Dare. Allison traveled in an expedition of over 25 people, and while she was the lead archaeologist sanctioned by the Nequerian government, she was only a guest, one on probation. The true leader of the expedition was the chief security agent assigned by the Nequerian government, Hamal al-Nasr. Hamal was a gentleman warrior and a devoted follower of the Order of Tagun. The man was 4 or so inches taller than she was, with a set of broad shoulders, a muscular form granted to him as payment for decades of training, and a set of unwavering brown eyes. He had a larger nose, a well-groomed black beard, and he wore a black headscarf, as was the tradition of Nequer. In order to remain in the country, Allison had to wear a headscarf as well. According to Nequerian custom, the sight of one's hair was only reserved for loved ones, close friends, or lovers. Allison had a lighter skin tone compared to Hamal, but back in Ocean Dare, she had been considered darker and more exotic. That was because her mother was essentially Nequerian. Her hair was brown and her eyes were gray. Hamal had been riding towards the front, where several other members of the expeditionary security force were. However, he slowed his camel and moved side by side with Allison.
We should be at the location you have specified in about 2 days. Do you really think we will find the tomb of Shadishi Baba this far southeast?
I really hope so. After reviewing the records from your own government's archaeologists, they hadn't found anything in the west, where he was apparently from. There were clues in his letters to Prince Debjali Afazar that he suspected some great evil coming from the southeast.
Ah, yes, the great corruptor. There are ancient legends from my people that talk of such things, about some heathen god raising an army of fanatics to conquer us from afar. When I was a child, the elders used to tell us tales to perhaps keep us well behaved.
There are many such tales from my home country as well. When we get back to Bubesh, I will have to see about gaining more information related to this great corruptor, if for nothing else but for interest's sake.
Actually, it is fortuitous that you mentioned interest. May I please ask you a question, Dr. Wreaver?
Oh, please. Call me Allison. We are braving the Nequerian desert in search of the ancient past.
Yes, we are. Why are you trying to search for the tomb of Shadishi Baba? I was told that prior to applying for excavation permits for his resting place, you were in the libraries, looking up obscure legends. Why the change?
I would love to tell you, but maybe later when it can be the two of us.
Very well. I look forward to talking with you later. Perhaps once we make up? With that being said, and please tell me, what brought you to Nequer originally? It is not often foreigners wish to come here, especially to discover the past. Are you hoping to find treasures to take back home?
Oh, no. Any and all treasures, artifacts, or objects will remain in Nequer. This is your past, after all. It would be wrong for a foreign country to steal them away from you. As for why I came to Nequer, my mother's roots came from this country.
Truly? Did your father meet your mother here?
Actually, they met in Enonak. My father was an archaeologist, doing excavations of some of the old kingdom ruins in that country. And that's where he met my mother.
Was your mother a refugee?
Maybe our ancestors were. But my mother and her family have been living in Enonak for quite some time. At least several generations.
I don't recall a time when Aquarians were leaving the country as refugees. But there are historic instances when Seleucidites had fled the old kingdoms, especially during the height of the Dagonite Crusades. I assume the reason why you changed has to do with that?
It does indeed.
I suppose it will be an interesting story. Seleucidia, the country that came before Naquia, was a very different country, one ruled by many conflicting values. Several sects of various competing faiths were driven from the old country. Which did your mother's ancestors belong to?
The Cabal of Sakata.
I do not know much of the demon Sakata, but I remember hearing that there were fanatics who idolized her. They were driven off long before the final fall of the Seleucidamite kings. What I do know was that she was a temptress of some kind.
There have been other sources I have come across that have indicated a different view of Sakata.
Oh, what do these other sources say?
Well, according to my sources, she was a misunderstood fertility goddess who also oversaw a lot more, liberal pursuits of intimacy.
Liberal pursuits of intimacy? You have a great sense of humor, Allison. I am not one to pass judgment on how people in the past found happiness and peace. Nor can I condemn or condone what the ancient practitioners of my religious order did. It is a shame that your ancestors had to flee these lands.
I have to admit, you are far more open-minded than most Southern Aquarians I meet here. Don't get me wrong, everyone has been very friendly. But they seem to be more touchy about any other faith that stands in opposition of the Order of Tagoon.
I am a devoted follower of Tagoon, and would not be pleasant if you were insulting my god or my faith. But you are not. You have your own path to walk, as do many others, both inside and outside of Naquia. Life is too short to be agitated by unnecessary conflicts. What religion do you practice in your country?
Oh, many worship the goddess, a powerful manifestation of the universal energy of life force that exists in all things. My father was once a practitioner of the universal balance sect, and he taught me about it. I have blended into other spiritual faiths.
I see. Please, ride with me at the front. There is something I would like to ask you, and my curiosity is piqued. Will you please ride with me?
The pits of Allison's stomach swirled within her, and yet she nodded. She urged her camel to follow his. When they got to the front of the procession, Hamal said something in Aquarian. The other warriors nodded, and then they fell back about 30 feet. Hamal scanned the horizon, and yet it was empty.
I misspoke before. I know more about the one you call Sakata than I let on. In ancient texts, Sakata was portrayed as a vile demoness who came to the world to tempt and corrupt the ancient Seleucidamite people. I mentioned there were many sects who were driven out by Tagoon, and they all were villainous deities.
So says your scriptures.
So they say. There is an ancient book that is highly discouraged by the Order of Tagoon, penned by a more liberal cleric. Her name was Gahira al-Dasun, and she posed a different view. Most of the copies of the text were burned or destroyed, but I have read it.
And what did the text say?
The book is titled The Lost Demons of the Desert, as most of the creatures and deities worshipped by heathens are in fact demons. The passages for Sakata were quite controversial, and not something I particularly liked. It said that Sakata was older than Tagun, and that they were lovers. However, she discarded him when he tried to control her. Kahira El-Dasun said that was the reason she was so hated by Tagun.
So, where did you read such a book? I would love to see it for myself.
Talk to the head of the Aquarian History Museum in Bubesh. His name is Dovokia El-Assad. Once I was hired to guard him, and he showed me the book. He has a special interest in what you are doing, and I suspect you both have the same goal. So, why are you really in Aquia?
The real reason? It's to find the Cabal of Sakata.
But they were driven out.
Can I trust you?
Yes, you can. So long as you are not trying to steal anything from any sacred sites, I don't care what you do, what you're seeking, or what you believe. Anything you say to me will be guarded.
I really want to believe that.
Tagun demands that we be true to our hearts and our paths as much as possible. I have no reason to lie to you or betray you.
I strongly believe the Cabal of Sakata exists today, in some fashion. Somehow, they survived. Because my mother's family and her community survived in secret in other places. My mother died in childbirth, so I never met her. But she taught my father all about the Cabal of Sakata. She even initiated him into it.
You do not follow the ways of the Universal Balance sect, do you?
No. My father had my mother cremated, and he kept her ashes in a special sealed urn. 5 years ago, Father came to Naquair to find the Cabal and give them my mother's remains. He never returned.
I'm sorry to hear that. Naquair can be dangerous for foreigners. It can't be dangerous for us too. I lost my wife and daughter to marauders. Please, continue with what you were saying.
I'm sorry for your losses, too. I came to Naquair to find my heritage, but also maybe find out what happened to my parents.
Do you expect to find your father alive, or perhaps his remains?
I've looked, and I'm still trying to find any information about them. However, I came into this country to find the last 3 temples of Sakata.
You think the temples still exist? Surely they were destroyed by now.
My father told me the same legends that my mother told him when they were falling in love. Shali Shibaba was known to and feared by the followers of Sakata.
I would say so. He hunted them down. The legends say his youngest brother fell under their sway, and so he hunted the Cabal of Sakata for the demons they were. No offense.
None taken. As I said, Shali Shibaba was known and feared. He was said to have destroyed many of the sacred temples, but not all of them. My father told me that 3 were never found.
And how will finding the tomb of the greatest enemy assist you? You don't wish to defile it, do you?
Of course not. I love those legends, but I also love history as a whole. Stories from the past can shape us if we let them. You have my word, I will do no harm to the relics, artifacts, or legacy of your people. I want to know what happened to him. I want to examine what he was buried with.
But why?
Because he was said to be a proud man. Prideful men are prone to boast or celebrate their victories. Maybe, just maybe, we can find some clue on how to find the Cabal of Sakata by relying on the greatest hunter of them all.
You are quite cunning. I like you, Allison. Perhaps we will find something in the tomb. However, we must be careful as we get closer to the southeast.
Is it closer to enemy borders?
Enemies within. There are many roving bands of marauders in this area of the country. And if we are really getting closer to the tomb of Shalish Baba, we may encounter zealous members of my faith.
I considered something like that. There are many traditionalists who do not care for those of my profession.
Grave robbers?
How dare you? The nerve! Most of my professional colleagues and I seek to preserve the past, rather than simply destroy it and steal the treasures.
I have to admit, you are not what I expected. If all archaeologists are like you, then I think I could enjoy their company.
Why, thank you. It is uplifting to meet people from my mother's culture, even if they aren't the same faith.
Hamal frowned ever so slightly, and then he followed Allison's line of sight. A dozen riders on horses were approaching them from the distance. Hamal drew the sword on the side of his camel, and he held it up.
Ride back to the middle and let us protect you. Go!
White-hot panic flickered in Allison's throat as she pulled the reins on her camel and urged it to run.